Hey guys, we're gonna start right at 5. That is less than 120 seconds from now. FYI. Hey guys, we're gonna get started. Good evening, everyone. The Durham Public Schools Board of Education work session is now in session. At this time, we wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone who is joining us this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to inform our parents, staff, and constituents about the work in line with our mission to embrace, educate, and empower every student to innovate, serve, and lead. Tonight, the administration will be presenting information to keep you up to date on our strategic plan. The interpreters for tonight are Martha Romero-Giles and Marty Ramirez. Thank you for taking time to join us tonight. We will start our meeting tonight with a moment of silence, as we always do. Please join us. Thank you, everyone. Item 3 on the agenda is agenda review and approval. Board members.
I move approval of the agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Lee, seconded by Ms. Byer, that we approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The measure passes 5-0. Item 4, board work session minutes, January 13th, 2022. Board members.
Move approval of the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Ms. Byer, seconded by Mr. Lee, that we approve the minutes as presented. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The measure passes 5-0. Item 5, general public comment. Do we have any in-person comment? Thank you. Do we have any online comment?
Like 6.
Board members, good afternoon. We have 3 comments that were submitted online, as well as 5 individual links to various news articles about masking, which are provided on the website. I will read the public comments now. First is from Neil Kaner of Deer Chase Wind. Many of the topics discussed at Board of Education meetings remind me of fluff pieces covered by network news. Yes, topics like the naming of a school is important, but not sufficient. We need to be informed, not shielded from serious issues. When I hear a comment about teacher staff substitute shortages, such as what we need is warm bodies, it leads me to believe that board members have never visited a school campus nor talked personally to an educator. Please discuss these topics during a Board of Education session. COVID's impact on student maturity and how it impacts our educators' ability to teach. How much money we spend on restorative practices professionals compared to prior years, and if they believe that it is sufficient. ESL students' performance, especially this year, and the importance of having no gap between them and non-ESL ones over the course of their education. The existence of exceptional students who cannot wear masks and the steps we have taken to protect their teachers and instructional assistants. Disrespect to substitutes and its impact on recruiting more of them. Gang presence, drug dealing, violent acts, and bullying. Improper mask wearing and other students' behaviors like fights, shoving, and even hugging while trying to keep students 6 feet apart. Finally, what have we done to teachers and staff who have not been vaccinated? It is still too high, and Dr. Mabenga keeps dancing around the issue. Thank you very much. The second comment is from an anonymous DPS working parent. It's a good thing all DPS schools are closed for the summer solstice because this district would make late night phone calls about impromptu closures due to, quote, excessive overhead sun, close quote. And the last comment after the several web links that were sent to us is by Sarah Miller of Academy Ridge Drive. Excuse me. As a parent, I strongly urge the district to use federal ESSER funds to provide $5,000 retention bonuses for all district employees and to grant teachers additional monthly planning time. The pandemic has underscored how absolutely essential school employees are for our community, and this is a small but significant step toward appropriately recognizing the contributions of these amazing, irreplaceable individuals. Please, let's put our money where our mouth is on this matter. And that completes our public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Sutter. Board members, item 6 is the consent items. Pardon me. We did not have any public comments in person, so I'm not going to reiterate the rules, but I did fail to state those ahead of time. Item 6 is our consent agenda. For our general public, the board and staff review the consent items in detail before the meeting starts. Any board member may pull an item from the consent agenda for further discussion. We have A, B, C, D, E, F, 6 items on the consent agenda tonight. Board members, what is your pleasure?
Move approval of the consent agenda, items A through F.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Byer, seconded by Ms. Umstead, that we approve the consent items as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent items pass unanimously. Item 7, Administration Academic Services.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Mabenga, and our community. The first item that we have is recognition and acknowledgement of CTE Month. We would like to thank you for your support of our career and technical education programming every month of the year, and especially your support of the 3-2-1 Work-Based Learning Initiative. This evening, I am pleased to share and seek your endorsement of the Cte Month Proclamation that will designate February as the CTE month in our district. This time, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Julie Pack, Executive Director of Career and Technical Education and Magnet Programming. Dr. Pack.
Thank you, Dr. Hardy. And good evening, board members and Dr. Mabenga. I also want to introduce to you our lead workforce development coordinator as of January, Ms. Jamia Green-Jones. And so she's here with me since we couldn't bring the whole department. To wish you all a happy CTE month. As you know, career and technical education provides students with academic and technical skills, knowledge, and training. Those things are necessary to succeed in our current our current situation and in the students' future careers. In Durham Public Schools, our CTE vision is that all students graduate future ready. And that gives them a competitive advantage in their next steps. So, and because this career education is critical to student success, the National Association of Career and Technical Education has deemed February as CTE month. And we want to say that it not only brings awareness to the great courses and opportunity that students have, but also to the wonderful CTE professionals in Durham Public Schools that are educating our children every day. So we want to celebrate them as well. And you'll be seeing some tweets go out to celebrate our students and our educators. So we would be honored if you would read and pass the proclamation to make CTE month, February CTE month here in Durham Public Schools.
Thank you, Dr. Pack and Dr. Hardy. Board members, on page 132 of our packet, we have the proclamation, Career and Technical Education Month. Ms. Valladares, would you like to start? And we'll head this to Ms. Byer, would you like to start? We'll head this direction.
I would be honored. Proclamation for Career and Technical Education Month. Whereas February 1st through 28th, 2022 has been designated Career and Technical Education Month by the Association for Career and Technical Education, and
whereas career and technical education offers students the opportunity to gain the academic, technical, and employable skills necessary for true career readiness, and
whereas students in career and technical education programs participate in authentic, meaningful experiences that improve the quality of their education and increase their engagement and achievement, and
whereas career and technical education provides students with career exploration opportunities earlier in their educational experience, which enables them to make informed and beneficial decisions about their academic coursework and pursue established programs of study and career pathways. And
whereas leaders from business and industry nationwide report, increasing challenges related to addressing the skills gap and connecting qualified professionals with available careers in critical and growing CTE-related fields, including healthcare, energy, skilled trades, advanced manufacturing, cybersecurity, and information technology, and
Whereas the career and technical education prepares students for these and other fulfilling careers by offering integrated programs of study that link secondary and post-secondary education and lead to attainment of industry-recognized credentials, and
whereas career and technical education programs ensure that employers have access to a qualified and thriving workforce, ensuring America is a strong and competitive economy.
therefore be it resolved that the Durham Public Schools Board of Education does hereby proclaim February 1st through 28th, 2022 as Career and Technical Education Month,
and urge all students and families to become familiar with the services and benefits offered by the career and technical education programs in Durham Public Schools, and to support and participate in these programs to enhance their individual skills and productivity, signed the 10th day of February, 2022.
Thank you all very much. And I have a little button for you if you'd like to wear it and help promote. And so someone could say, what is CTE? And you can tell them all the great things that you know.
before we celebrate, we do need a motion to pass this proclamation. No, I think it'll pass. So I move that we pass the 2022 CTE Month Proclamation.
a second.
It's been moved by Ms. Umstead, seconded by Ms. Lewis, that we pass the CTE Month Proclamation. All in favor? I'm sorry, further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you, CTE program.
All right. Thank you very much.
Academic Services, item 7B, Strategic Plan Priority 2 Update.
We could pull up the presentation, and thank you, Dr. Spencer. I know you're going to come to the podium, and we do have some folks outside if we can allow them to come in. Next slide, please. Dr. Mabinga, board members, we are excited this evening to provide our board and our community an update for priority 2 in regards to our strategic plan for the 2021-22 school year. I would like to take this time to acknowledge and thank our Chief of Staff, Attorney Tanya Giovanni, for working with me and providing guidance as well as oversight with priority 2. Our goal teams have been busy supporting schools, students, and families as we fully return to in-person learning and are realizing now more than ever, an emphasis on student wellness is critical to our overall success. Next slide, please. This evening, our priority 2 members will provide an overview of the work that has been occurring throughout the life of our strategic plan, but they will also discuss how the work of the 2 goal teams has merged into a broader shared journey to address the impacts of a global pandemic, social isolation, potential trauma associated with all of this. The goal teams will share new information on strategies that they have been implementing, as well as future planning that will lead to long-term sustainability. Our teams recognize that priority 2 is both driven and evaluated by data. Dr. Julie Spencer, Assistant Superintendent for Research and Accountability, will provide a comprehensive data update relevant to the goals of priority 2. Overall, the format of this update will be familiar to our board and our community and includes updates on the initiatives that are in place, in progress, and next steps. As always, the entire team is here to answer any questions the board may have and to engage in the discussion, providing clarity regarding our work. Next slide, please. As a refresher to our broader audience, priority 2 seeks to provide a safe school environment for every child by attaining 2 goals. Goal 2A, 100% of DPS will implement a cultural framework, and goal 2B, OSS will be reduced to 4% of less of students. Our strategic planning team decisions regarding the priorities are in light of our global pandemic we have been experiencing are focused on social, emotional, mental, and academic wellness for our DPS students. Next slide, please. Members of our strategic plan priority 2 are here with us this evening. I'd like to ask our team members to stand and to be recognized at this time. Our goal team leads include Dr. Laverne Maddox Perry, Senior Executive Director for Student Support Services, Dr. Chris Soto, Coordinator for Coordinator for Social and Emotional Mental Health, Dr. Kelvin Bullock, Executive Director for Equity Affairs, Dr. Al Royster, Student Services Director for Prevention and Intervention. In addition, the members of the teams are also listed on our slide. We'll go forward one slide. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I missed that. And our team members work collaboratively together to continue to seek input from our principals, assistant principals, restorative practice center coordinators, teachers, school counselors, school social workers, and most importantly, our students. We also continually to expand our feedback loop to ensure we hear from our community members. The collective perspectives are essential to achieving the goals of priority 2. Next slide, please. This slide is a reminder of our 5 strategies that are within Goal 2A, our cultural framework, using data and professional learning. And if you'll go to the next slide, our strategies for Goal 2B, identifying practices causing disproportionality, implement restorative systems, professional learning, mandated educational programming. Next slide. If we were to try to summarize priority 2, it would be to share this particular slide. You'll see our investments, including our local partners and stakeholders who are instrumental elements of this work. With research and evidence-based strategies and learning from our community partners, we believe priority 2 guides our educators to do everything we can to prevent harm or trauma, respond when there is harm or trauma, and to always demonstrate care for our students and our staff. As we review the priority 2 objectives, you will hear the team explain the usage of 3 specific data sources for informing and monitoring our implementation. The priority 2 goal leads will discuss our results from the nationally normed Panorama Social Emotional Learning Student Survey data. Dr. Julie Spencer will discuss the 2 other areas. First, our locally administered student climate survey and this year's results, as well as our district discipline data. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Julie Spencer, Assistant Superintendent for Research and Accountability.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Dr. Hardy. Good evening, board members, Dr. Mabenga, and to our DPS community. As we think about the work of Priority 2 to provide a safe school environment that supports the whole child, school and district staff are reviewing a broad scope of data continually. The data includes discipline data, school climate data, social emotional survey data, as well as anecdotal and observational data. We are continually tracking, monitoring our progress, looking for areas of concern, identifying students and/or schools that may need additional support. I would also like to remind our Durham community that a number of our historical discipline reports are on our DPS website under the facts and figures section, as we know many stakeholders are interested in knowing more about discipline in our schools. Next slide, please. We will first take a look at the historical discipline data regarding disciplinary consequences. We generally look at this data and do a comparison from year to year and over the previous years. However, COVID has presented a number of challenges in tracking data historically. Specifically in our 2019-20 school year, our students were not on school campuses during the fourth quarter. Also in the 2021 school year, our students did not return to in-person learning until the spring, and even then less than half of our secondary students were in person. We've included this set of slides simply to remind us where we've been, as well as to serve as a reminder that data from the last 2 school years is not really comparable to previous years. We're not going to spend a lot of time reviewing the numbers because, as you'll be able to see, the data for the 2021 school year is so different than previous years. But the first 2 slides walk us through historical data of in-school suspension and restorative practice center data. We've included slides that reflect both the number of incidents, which may be a duplicated number. Next slide, please. As well as a slide that includes the number of students. You'll see at the very top where it says total students. That is an unduplicated number. You will also notice that on the slides for Restorative Practice Center, the title includes both in-school suspension and restorative practices because that transition actually happened in the middle in the 2018-19 school year. Next slide, please. As we move to the numbers of incidents that resulted in short-term suspension, which is a suspension of 10 or fewer days, you'll continue to see that our 2021 numbers are significantly less than previous years due to our remote learning environment. Next slide, please. I would like to highlight this slide, which reflects the unduplicated number of students who received a short-term suspension. This particular data point is one of our benchmark goals for Priority 2 in our strategic plan. Our goal in the strategic plan is to have less than 4% of our students receiving a short-term suspension by the end of the 22-23 school year. Next slide, please. And then our slide that goes to a long-term suspension, which is a suspension anything over 10 days. Next slide, please. Although we should be cautious in comparing from year to year during this COVID season, the best comparison we can provide you would be a comparison of Q1 in the 19-20 school year, which would be pre-pandemic and also year 2 of our strategic plan, to Q1 of this current school year. We thought it would be helpful to see that by most counts, our discipline reflects significant decreases in both Restorative Practice Center and short-term suspensions. You will see more than half of our schools saw decreases when we do this comparison. Additionally, we've included the number of schools with 0 incidents at the very bottom. These schools are duplicated in the decreased or maintained categories, but certainly worth mentioning. Although the year is only at the halfway mark, we are optimistic that this trend will continue through the year. Next slide, please. Hot off the press, this data reflects at a high level how our students are currently perceiving their school climate so that we can have specific data to foster a positive climate in our schools. This survey was given to our 5th, 7th, and 11th graders in Durham Public Schools in November and December. And it addresses emotional and physical safety, student discipline, well-being and engagement, high expectations, student support, social emotional learning, and school and classroom environment. Most significantly, you will see that 87% of our students that took the survey feel that their school is a good place to attend and learn, which is a 3% increase since we last gave the survey in 2019-20. Also included are a few extra questions that help paint a picture of how our students perceive the climate of their schools. You will note that all of these questions show increases, maintain or show increases since 1920. Next slide, please. One other data point that helps provide a status update on where we are with discipline is to provide you with information on the most frequent incident behaviors. You will note that although overall numbers for Restorative Practice Center as well as out-of-school suspension are down, the most frequent behavior that we have been seeing is fighting and physical aggression in all 3 grade level bands. Additionally, you'll see serious disruptive behavior as another frequent behavior for all 3 grade levels. I wanted to include this information to ensure that you see the full picture of the behavioral incidents that are occurring in our schools. In the past, you have seen more non-compliance with directions, non-compliance with school rules, which definitely presents itself differently. At this time, I will transition to Student Support Services team, who's going to share more on how we are continually, proactively working with our students to create school environments responsive to student and school needs.
Next slide, please. Thank you so much, Dr. Spencer. Good evening, board members, Dr. Mabenga, Dr. Hardy, Durham Public Schools public community. Anytime we have an opportunity to share information about the work we're doing around social and emotional learning supports, we're eager to do that. And tonight is no different. As seen in Dr. Spencer's data review, the quantitative data shows improvements and is encouraging. However, the converse of that and the continued focus of priority 2 is this question. If the data says things are getting better, then why does schooling somehow feel different this year? That is a question we've been asking and answering for principals, teachers, and students since the return to in-person learning. The social isolation and possible traumatic experiences during the global pandemic have taken its toll on some of our students who've not yet developed strong skills in the SEL or social emotional learning competencies. That feeling shared by some is the exact reason the work of our priority 2 team can regain some of that traction from pre-pandemic days. The information on this slide encompasses the social emotional learning domains Durham Public Schools has chosen to measure on our panorama survey. I'd like to take a few minutes to distinguish this panorama survey we'll discuss from the student climate survey results shared by Dr. Spencer. There are a couple of differences. The panorama survey is administered in many districts across the country, and our results are analyzed relative to that national sample. The panorama survey is also administered pre-K through grades 12, with modifications to both the format and method of administering and analyzing it to include developmentally appropriate language. The pre-K to second grade survey is answered by teachers on behalf of the students, and all of the students in grades 3 through 12 answer for themselves on an age-appropriate version of the survey. The panorama survey data captures the SEL competencies at the district, school, classroom, and individual student levels, and provides a solely student-centered perspective of their feelings and understandings around the social emotional competencies. We are in the second full year of Panorama Survey administration. We did administer this survey during some of our remote learning period, and we have administered for the fall this year. You may have noticed that there's the Castle SEL Competency Circle also on this slide. The SEL competencies that we're really focusing on and that are aligned through the SEL domains for the survey are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. These domains are well aligned, which are the foundation for our current and future SEL curriculum selections. What we will do routinely as a curriculum or resource for teaching our students about the SEL competencies. If students have not yet mastered these competencies, particularly self-management and relationship skills, you are likely going to see an increase in the more visible, seemingly more impactful violations of the code of conduct, like fighting and physical aggression. These are what we call externalizing behaviors or acting out behaviors, directed at other people or things like someone else's property. Externalizing behaviors have a direct impact on a school's culture and climate. When we think about culture, it is how we do things in our schools, and our climate is how it feels in our schools. And that is why this update is really important to highlight the perspective that we get from the Panorama survey about how our students feel. Since the fall 2021 administration of the survey, we've had time to analyze and integrate those insights from that data into school-based MTSS goal setting. We're looking forward to the spring 2022 administration at the beginning of March, so just slightly less than a month away. We share this information because it's important to us that we show a data point that extends beyond discipline to the direct climate in their schools. Our fall administration of the Panorama SEL survey was the third administration, as I said earlier. Even though virtual schooling was for most of last year, there has been a consistency about the results that allow us a good amount of confidence in the validity of the students' experiences. Here are the 7 domains that we have been surveying. I said that. The percentage, can we go to the next slide, please? Sorry. There we go. So as you can see, there are some things that we're going to celebrate, and this is just a preview of some of the celebrations, and then we'll talk a little bit about areas for growth. But we have a good bit of confidence in the validity of the experiences, and what you see is the percentage of students that we'd like to celebrate who gave positive or affirmative responses to the questions from those given domains. And the number right next to it is the percentile rank, which details that number relative to other schools who have taken the Panorama survey. As we looked at the data, we selected 3 areas out of the many strengths and opportunities for growth to highlight. First, the cultural awareness and action is defined as how often students learn about, discuss, and confront issues of race, ethnicity, and culture in school. This was only given to students in grades 6 through 12. In general, our students do feel that our teachers encourage them to discuss race and culture, and they feel comfortable about conversations about the topic with their peers. Another area for celebration is at the elementary level. You'll see we had high sense of belonging and growth mindset. At the elementary level, our students walk into schools feeling cared about and supported, and so their sense of belonging is high at the 90th percentile relative to other schools in the country. They also believe they have the capacity to grow, right around 90th percentile as well. We do have areas for growth, as we said, at the elementary area, in behavioral self-management. Next slide, please. You'll see here for elementary students, self-management, they responded in a way that was below the 40th percentile, which is concerning to us. We also have a concern at the middle and high school level in the sense of belonging. Okay? with students feeling like they are generally not connected personally to adults in their building and do not seem to fit into their school community, right around 43%. And that is below the 20th percentile nationally. Through our multi-tiered systems of support teams, we have set goals in each of these areas to focus school-based practices on interventions that will help address these concerns. Next slide, please. Consistent with our multi-tiered system of supports, we've been taking a tiered approach to supporting building healthy culture and climate in our schools. This includes full team trainings for staff members on cultural frameworks or even responses to trauma. We're in the third year of implementing our social emotional learning curriculum as a vital component of core for every elementary student in the classroom, with plans to select a secondary social emotional learning curriculum later this spring. There are supplemental supports in place like school-based counseling services or even student groups. And then we have a third tier of more intensive initiatives and supports like co-located clinical mental health counseling through increased partnerships that include bilingual services. We have Sparks groups across the district and has structured psychotherapy for adolescents responding to chronic stress. And these groups are meant to help students with similar traumatic experiences receive additional support. Or we also have newly added school-based mental health counselors. We're excited to have newly trained trauma-informed leadership teams in our schools. And we used data from schools that demonstrated a need for more intensive response to assign those added mental health counselors. Our team wants to thank the superintendent and the board for approval of these additional expenditures within our ESSER plan. We realize allocation of these resources is a huge investment, but we appreciate it tremendously. We know our students will gain more strengths within the Seo competencies in the long term because our district's governance and our community stakeholders believe in social emotional wellness. Next slide, please. We began implementation of restorative practices centers during the 2018-2019 school year in response to an identified need to shift from punitive ISS practices to more restorative practices when dealing with discipline. We also wanted to make sure we were able to teach pro-social behaviors while keeping students connected to school and learning during the school day. Since that time, we've had to work to develop our RPC or Restorative Practice Center coordinators with training on restorative practices and establishing structures and processes within the restorative practices centers. During remote learning, we were quickly able to pivot our RPCs or restorative practice centers by developing a Canvas course that allows students with at-risk online behaviors to process incidents in a reflective manner designed to change the behaviors. We returned to full in-person learning this year with refresher trainings for all RPC coordinators on the identified look-fors within a successful RPC. And we've had one-on-one consultation with RPCs new to the district, resulting from either turnover or some other movement that helps assist them in creating restorative spaces within all our schools. This school year has also allowed our RPC coordinators to be trained alongside some of their schools' restorative practices implementation teams so that we ensure learning spaces continue to grow to be more restorative, and RPCs are in place to assist with reparation and restoration of disrupted relationships. We continue to strengthen our RPCs through direct consultation and feedback as part of our DPS culture and climate learning walks currently ongoing. Once again, with a resetting frame of mind to improve consistent use of the successful RPC components in all of our RPCs. Next slide, please. This slide shows our Seo Implementers, and Implementers refers to our social emotional learning curriculum. That's the lessons, objectives, and activities used to teach Seo competencies. Each elementary school is using an SEL curriculum routinely to build their student strengths in each of the SEL competencies. There are 13 schools currently implementing zones of regulation, 10 schools implementing Move This World, and 8 schools implementing Second Step. And we also have 1 school who continues to implement the Leader in Me. Next slide, please. Every Durham Public Schools has identified a cultural framework. Yay. Though there are some similarities, there are also distinctions between an SEL curriculum and cultural framework. A cultural framework outlines expectations for how we are in a space, in a school, in a community. And an SEL curriculum includes the lessons that help you build your SEL competencies. So a cultural framework is the model used by the schools to ensure strong relationships and a sense of community. A cultural framework includes the language and the symbols that are used within a community to proactively and systematically improve school culture and climate. We are really happy about this commitment by our schools and want to point out that there are 10 Capturing Kids' Heart schools, 4 schools currently who've chosen responsive classrooms, and 38 schools currently practicing restorative practices. I'd also like to emphasize that these commitments have led to staff training. We've got plans underway. However, each school is in its own unique space of implementation, and our word for all of 2021, 2022 has been reset. We know we are resetting all aspects of schooling after nearly 18 months of remote learning for some and a raging deadly pandemic. You will notice that there are some schools in bold under the restorative practices listings, and that indicates that those schools have operational training teams to ensure the sustainability of implementation on their campuses. So that means the schools in bold can actually train their own teachers around restorative practices.
Which they all seem bold to me.
Yeah. I'm sorry, can we see them?
Sorry, we're looking at our online version too.
Okay.
Do we send that as a
Follow-up?
follow-up item?
Okay. I will get an update on that.
Thank you.
We'll make sure before the end of the night, we highlight those schools that have had those training teams.
Thank
I
you.
don't want to do it by memory because I'll miss someone.
Sure, thank you.
We'll make sure it's a follow-up item, Mr. Sears.
Thank you.
Okay, so next slide, please. Next, we'll talk with more specificity about the strategies of priority 2. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Al Royster, one of the Goal 2B team leads. He'll facilitate the discussion on what we have in place, in progress, and our next steps.
Thank you, Dr. Max Perry. Good evening, Dr. Mabanga, board members, Dr. Hardy, and the Durham community. The continuous work of goals 2A and 2B overlap in so many ways. As a result, we have combined strategies that are in place on this slide and will highlight some of them. For the third full calendar year, elementary schools are implementing an SEL curriculum. We believe that the results of these efforts are showing up in our panorama data, particularly in the elementary school data that was shared earlier. In our second full year of partnership with Panorama Education to provide data that supports individual student, social, and emotional well-being, and also allows us to evaluate the effectiveness of our SEL programs. The DPS SEL Hub Embrace has continued to be a resource this fall and winter for families and staff. Recent pages have highlighted program offerings for the DPS Staff Wellness Day in November, and more recently, provided resources for dealing with community violence. Just a few years ago, our Office of Equity Affairs piloted the We Are Kings program in 18 schools. This year, we have over 50 We Are Kings and our We Are Queens programs in over 30 schools. These programs support the building of a healthy school culture and climate, relationships, self-esteem, and self-efficacy for many of our students of color. Additionally, the Office of Equity Affairs has continued to lead professional learning sessions in many schools centered on Panorama social emotional student survey data. During the past 3 years, Student Services has provided professional learning to administrators to give an overview of discipline policy and procedures, a review of our alternative to suspensions or ATS programs, short-term suspension information, alternative learning center options, and long-term suspension procedures. We knew our students would come back eager to learn. However, we recognized that challenging events over the past year and a half may affect students in different ways and cause them to act inappropriately. As a result, in addition to reviewing the policies and procedures, ATS programs, alternative learning options, and long-term suspension procedures, we added information on restorative practices. Also, collaborative conversations were held between administrators and student support services on how to address potential discipline situations. Our alternative suspension or ATS community partnerships have not changed. We continue to collaborate with our 6 community partners that address drug education and counseling or DEAC, gang prevention counseling or GAC, sexual misconduct counseling for victims, theft through Earn It, bullying and harassment, and fighting fair through our Conflict Resolution Center and the Durham Teen Court and Restitution Center. Administrators have an easy one-stop Google folder that contains all the information to utilize our ATS programs. Our New Direction Center continues to provide reassignment for students who are short-term suspended for 10 days or less for all grades 3 through 12. Our coordinator, Ms. Erica Boone, and her staff do an excellent job in providing students a conducive learning environment where they can continue their learning and build essential social emotional skills prior to returning to their base schools. As mentioned, New Direction serves students in grades 3 through 12. This is a change as we no longer utilize an outside community partner for grades 9 through 12, as in the past years. Our New Direction Center is now housed at the Holton Performance Learning Center. The New Direction Center is supported by one of our community partners, the Conflict Resolution Center, where they provide conflict resolution to students who attend. Next slide, please. In addition to the practice we have in place, there are a number of strategies that are in progress. Just like in our in place slide, we have combined strategies and we'll highlight some of them. By the end of the school year, we have selected and partnered with one or more SEO providers to support SEO competency development for our middle and high schools. We look forward to beginning implementation in the 2022-23 school year. We have increased our investment in trauma-informed systems of support at the school level. Through our partnership with the Center for Child and Family Health, the number of schools that have received at least 20 hours of trauma-specific training has increased from 6 in 2020 to 21 during the 21-22 school year. And all 54 schools have accessed at least 1 hour of trauma training. To support our high-needs students, in addition to co-located mental health services, we have supported 27 students in intensive group therapy through Sparks. As we support our students with the highest needs, we also want to ensure model SEL and restorative practices across Tier 1. In addition to our culture and climate walks and supports for restorative frameworks across the district, all of our CKH schools have received visits from CKH strategists to support their school-based teams as they develop the community norms associated with healthy school climate. The focus of this year's district-wide equity professional learning is on supporting educators in becoming equity change agents. The data set that is utilized in considering equity change is the Panorama Social Emotional Student Survey. The Office of Equity Affairs is also collaborating with the Department of Professional Learning to lead a series with teaching and learning coaches, mentors, and exceptional children's facilitators on the book Coaching for Equity. These sessions support leaders and coaching educators on practices that will advance equity in our schools. Once again, we want to thank the board for supporting the district ESSER plan. With your continued support, DPS was able to add 3 additional behavior support assistants and 2 behavior support technicians to our district behavior support team. The additional behavior professionals provide short-term and long-term support for specified students, Tier 1 whole school support, or emergency services when a student is in emotional or mental health crisis. Next slide, please. We have several steps that we plan to implement to continue our momentum toward meeting our benchmarks for priorities 2A and 2B. As with our past two slides, we will combine strategies and we'll highlight some of them. Student Services, in collaboration with the Exceptional Children Department, is providing a mid-year all things discipline refresher and support session for all administrators. In addition, these sessions will provide support with collaboration conversations among administrators on discipline incidents that have occurred during the year already. In light of the racial and educational equity policy, the Office of Equity Affairs is developing and starting to implement training for district departments to advance equity. The office already has departments, for example, the instructional technology, scheduled to participate in the training. And now we'll turn it over to Dr. Hardy to wrap up our Priority 2 update. Dr. Hardy.
Thank you, Dr. Royster. Board members, we will send that updated slide to you with the schools in bold, but I do want to share them with you now and for our public audience. Bethesda, Creekside, Merrick Moore, Sandy Ridge, Spring Valley, Brogdon, Lucas, Holton, Riverside, Southern, and Lakeview. I think our board knows how excited we are about our strategic plan. Priority 2 is one of those priorities that has really been at the core of our work as we are dealing with a global pandemic. We know how important the social, emotional wellness of our staff and students is truly critical to have we do our work moving forward. I hope you can see that we have been strategic and intentional in response to the data. We want to make sure that we are providing an honest perspective of where we currently are and the conditions that we currently have for our young people, but also the strategies that we have to improve the conditions so that we can all be successful. I would like to thank our goal team leads and members here. I apologize, I omitted Mr. James Futrell in the introduction, one of our directors of student services, and I apologize for that, Mr. Futrell. Would also like to thank our team members and all of our staff that have been working on Priority 2. We just have a portion of them here. It takes a collective effort to work collaboratively to ensure that we are providing really the meat to the strategies that we have in our strategic plan. At this time, we are here and available for any discussion or questions that you will have. Thank you.
Thank you, administration. Board members. Ms. Byer.
Well, just a big thank you to the team. We set some bold goals in 2018 with restorative practice and funding a lot of that. And it's great to see the timeline that led us here. We know we've come a long way, and yet we still have a very long way to go. And especially throwing a global pandemic into education, it certainly gives us more challenge, but I feel like you have some pieces in place that we can continue to build on. I appreciate you shouting out the ESSER funds that are dedicated to this work. I think that is one very key area to really address mental health needs of students. But can you remind us just where we are, and it may be a follow-up item on counselor to student ratios throughout the district as we budget and plan and go forward? Does anyone have that on the top of their head, just kind of where we are and where we need to be to meet national suggestions? Yeah.
Mr. Futrell, do you want to speak to that? And I know we did provide an update and we can make sure to share with the board in the addendum strategic plan presentation as well.
Yeah, so obviously we always reaching for our 1 to 250 ratio, which is best practice around our American School Counselor Association recommended ratios. We saw slight improvements this particular year with moving towards that 1 to 250. But of course, there's still work to do with additional allotments for school counselors so that we can increase the number of school counselors so that there's more personalized time that can be spent between students and school counselors.
Ms. Byer, can I just jump on that for a second?
Please.
Because it addresses one of my questions. I mean, you stated that the 27 students were served by Sparks. 1 to 250 isn't going to cut it for really addressing how poverty impacts our students. We're not providing therapy at 1 to 250. We're providing a base minimum of counseling service. So, I've been agitated listening to the news recently about where the state is spending money and all the nonprofits that are trying to help, but we're not addressing poverty at 1 to 250, and we're a long way from 1 to 250. Thank you, Ms. Byer.
Can I add one point, because I also had a question about the ratio and where we stand now. When I was listening to the presentation, one of the comments was that with ESSER funding, we've been able to increase RPC coordinators and counselors or the 10 mental health counselors is what you said specifically. Is that temporary with our ESSER funds, or is that going to be permanent?
That is part of our plan with our ESSER dollars. So those are time-limited positions. We're always going to work very closely with our board in terms of sustainability, but those are time-limited positions over the next 2 years.
I think that's really important to understand and to plan forward with, because I think our schools are going to see a vast need for those 10 folks and more as we lead forward. Let's budget forward. New Directions has grades 3 through 12. Young students and high school students in a single setting. I've heard some concerns about that. Do you all have ways to address how those students commingle and are also kept safe and separate? Is there?
Yes, I'll start, and then Dr. Royster may want to add. We have New Directions and currently located in our PLC Holton, and we've worked very closely with Dr. Monk and his team regarding space. And so this year we are a little bit limited due to space. However, our coordinator, Ms. Boone, works very carefully, not only with our principals who are referring students, but also her support to make sure that we have an opportunity for students to not only be safe, but for them to have some strategies as they get ready to transition back to their regular setting. And we're constantly, as we're planning for the upcoming year, we're in that planning right now. So Dr. Monk's team, as well as members of our team, looking towards the district in terms of space for any new EC classrooms and other space that we're going to need to accommodate. And PLC and our New Directions program is also on that list. So we'll work collaboratively to see where space is available if we need to expand that particular program just in terms of space to make sure that we can accommodate more students.
Yeah, I guess particularly, are they riding buses together? Third graders riding with high schoolers? Are they kept separate in that setting? Is there?
They are not riding buses together.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all keeping an interest on best practices for that going forward. You spoke to having bilingual co-located mental health services and increasing that capacity, but I do think it's probably something that we still have challenges with. Is that what we're finding from providers? Is that a fair assessment to say we're working on it, but it's not where we want it to be?
Dr. Soto?
Yes, it is an ongoing concern. It's certainly one that our providers are doing the best to recruit both talented counselors and also those with Spanish language skills and other language skills as well. At this point in time, it's a matter of finding capacity, and we're always looking for additional partnerships that are going to support our Spanish language students.
Ms. Byer.
I think that's where I am right now. I'm left with what more can we do with this budget season coming up, and I look forward to hearing more about Panorama, what we're paying for it, and what good data you think we're getting from it going forward. Because I still think there's probably just a whole lot of trauma that we're not seeing, and that we have to really continue to build relationships as we're rebuilding trust with students and their families. But I appreciate the progress we've made and that you all have put this high on the list in the strategic plan.
Thank you. Ms. Umstead, Mr. Lee, and then Ms. Lewis, and then Ms. Valladares.
Thank you all so much for the presentation. I think it was good to see some of the highlights and areas that we're doing really well, but also some of the ways that we need to grow. And I appreciate how you all approached it. Like, here are areas that we need to grow, and this is what we're doing to get there. I have a couple of questions. I'm going to piggyback a little bit off Ms. Byers' question around school counselors. I think we do need to move to that ratio 1 to 250. But I also wonder, are you all seeing the need for other types of roles? Like, we know that school counselors are trained for certain types of work. And are we seeing that we actually need more mental health or licensed clinical therapists? Like, I'm wondering where we're seeing the right roles fit for our schools.
I think that's an excellent question. And with our ESSER dollars, and we appreciate the board support, we have been able to add some student support services roles. So at some of our middle schools and high schools, we have those counselors that are really focused on making sure our students are getting the credits that they need. So a specific laser focus on graduation. We also have the 10 clinical mental health counselors. So really focused on the clinical work and helping our students with trauma, as well as we have not part of our ESSER, but a part of our budget that will be sustained is a 12-month counseling position at each of our comprehensive high schools to help not only with all of the counseling needs, but specifically with strategic scheduling of our young people in those large comprehensive high schools. This year will give us a great opportunity to see, as we work with our principals and move into allotment season, where are the places with those ESSER dollars that those funds, especially in student services, have been successful. Where are the areas that we need to continue to provide support so that we can make sure that we do that for the next year of our ESSER dollars. And then that will also help us if we do need to bring recommendations to our board for any funding outside of the ESSER dollars moving forward.
We can keep asking ourselves that question of what is the right position to have the leverage and the impact that we need. And then unfortunately, I'm already thinking like 2024, when some of these ESSER dollars run out, is going to be here quicker than we realize. How do we create the right transition for some of these positions who've been supporting students so that we can keep that support inside of our schools? The other question I have, and switch gears a little bit, is looking at the incident. It was repeated or physical aggression was one of the higher incidents. And I'm wondering if I'm kind of putting someone on the spot here, so I apologize in advance. If we understand the root of why that is happening more this year and how we're kind of addressing that particularly.
So I'll start, and I think Dr. Maddox-Perry she was moving to the podium. So I think it's really important, and Ms. Byer asked this question in terms of panorama data. One of the things that we're trying to do is use the information that we have, as well as the groups that we work with in terms of our students, to provide us with feedback. And so we are seeing some of the things that we would assume to see, but the data does support it in terms of how our students are feeling, especially at the middle and high school level, from our panorama data, as well as from our student climate data. And so although there is overall, as you could see in the data, a decrease in the number of incidents, the incidents that are occurring are incidents that do create more of a major disruption. And it speaks to being in a pandemic and being isolated, not necessarily knowing how to respond when there is a particular trigger. And so that's why the SEL curriculum is so important, is that it really helps us work with our young people in terms of when a trigger occurs to Nakia, how does Nakia respond? And without some of that information, then I may likely respond in a violent manner. And if I do so, then that's what you see manifest in terms of fighting and physical aggression. I can start to learn as I work with my teachers and staff when there is a trigger to Nakia, what are some other ways that Nakia can respond that not only keep Nakia safe, but keep the students around Nakia safe. And so those are the areas that we're really trying to work with our students, but also with our counselors to make sure that students are starting to learn some of those strategies, and then recognizing and acknowledging that for so long, we were isolated during the pandemic. And so for many of our young people, this is their first time in a comprehensive high school or in a middle school. They were in a small elementary classroom when we went into isolation due to the pandemic. So that socialization piece is so different. It's almost like we're starting over with schooling again. And so there are great opportunities for us to use the tools that we have. And I think that we are, based on what we see when I'm out in schools, what I hear from our principals, we are definitely making progress. But at the same time, we still have a lot of work to do to come back from almost 18 months of being away. Dr. Maddox-Perry, I don't know if you or the members of the team have anything to add.
So every time, thank you for asking that question, Chair Umstead, but every time I have an opportunity to say, you know, a lot of the investment that you see around SEO competencies and a cultural framework is about relationship. And what we find is the students who have not only good relationships with peers, but also trusted adults. I will say that repeatedly. When we are able to help our adults be equipped to not only handle situations when harm or there is a conflict, but when they also can just routinely build relationships and be trusted by students, they then, even if they don't know how to cope with it on their own, they do feel comfortable going to adults. And so I think what we're finding is with, like Dr. Hardy said, with the isolation, some of that relationship building piece may not happen for some young people. And it has been really difficult for them to adjust to being back in person. So we're investing in the relationships, and we think in long term, our students will be better off for it because they'll be better able to cope with what comes their way.
Got one more question. Thank y'all for that response too. With restorative practices, I am so glad that we're, I guess, almost 3 or 4 years into that work now. I remember talking about it when it first came to the district. But I wanted to know, a lot of times when we've talked about it in this setting, it's been about how we are responding when something happens. And now we're talking about more as a cultural framework, which I think is right, because you have to build a community to make sure that when a harm happens, that you're able to repair that connection to the community. So I wanted to know if you could share a little bit about what restorative practices is looking like in our schools as a proactive kind of cultural framework.
You are exactly right, Chair Umstead. When we began restorative practices, it was really in response to a crisis to make sure that we kept students engaged in school, right? And so we wanted to really be, again, to shift what we saw then from punitive ISS processes to more restorative problem-solving processes using restorative practices. But still, we recognize that if we're restoring or repairing, that a relationship must have to be in place, right? And so that's why now we do shift towards the implementation of community-wide use of restorative practices to build relationships, to build community at the core tier 1 level amongst all students and all staff. And so what we found, as you heard earlier, is that now we've been able to utilize our RPC coordinators as part of those school-wide teams who are helping to implement those practices and share those best practices with their colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you all for this work. It's so important.
Mr. Lee.
Yes, thank you for this. You all know that I really love the strategic plan updates. So every time we have these, I appreciate it. I'd love for the public to see it. We get comments about, talking about the real things in our board meetings. These are the real things. These are how we get them solved. I had a question about measurement. With the SEL tools, zones of regulation, move this world, second step. How are we evaluating them at a regular cadence to make sure that's still the right tool for that particular school or this district or whatever it may be? We speak to parents. In Sandy Ridge, we have the zones of regulation, and it's done wonders for my children, all 3 of them. But I'm curious, but that's just my family. I'm curious of how we measure and evaluate them to see if we need to go a different direction, if it's still working and whatnot, or how do we do that? And how can we as a board see those types of results as we move forward?
Yeah, so I really appreciate the question, and to be frank, it frustrates me a little bit because when you're putting together a presentation and you go, oh, I missed putting that in the notes. Well, this is one of those instances. I would say that a next step is really making sure that we're utilizing the panorama data to do program evaluation, and that's something that is absolutely on our docket. In particular, taking a look at the 3 social emotional learning curricula that we have at the elementary school level and making sure that those improvements are really tangible. Right now, what we have is anecdotal, and most of what I'm hearing from families, from kids, my own son is a student at Lakewood, and they have our zones, and so I hear about the yellow zone and the blue zone and the green zone from him as well. But that's obviously not sufficient, and I think moving forward, we really need to dig into that panorama data, which is one of the reasons why I would really advocate keeping it and moving forward with that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think it's important, and those who've been around a little while, I always advocate for whenever we do programs that we have some sort of cycle of evaluation to make sure it's still valid. Right. Clearly, I believe these are working. I've heard about all of them from various directions. However, I still think it's important to globally or look at this data to make sure we're still doing what's right for the children in the individual schools or doing these programs. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Ms. Lewis.
Thank you for the presentation. I also enjoy getting the strategic plan updates and getting into the meat of what's going on within our schools and how we're supporting our students. I'm going to build off of Mr. Lee's question. And before that, I just want to also say I appreciate the information around TILT and the training that's happened in our schools, and that every school is implementing MTSS and evaluating where our students are coming back to the table. This was definitely a lot of information to take in because we have layered approaches to reaching kids in different places. And I think that is paramount. And with the numbers that we see from the panorama, the support that the students feel, and it's going to, as the children are learning these skills, they'll build on them. So hopefully we will be able to get to that 1 to 250 ratio and won't need as much because they're building on these skills. And we're hearing the conversations at home with our own children to say, I'm in this zone right now. I'm feeling this color right now, but that will build from elementary to middle to high school. And touching on what Mr. Lee was saying, program evaluation. When I look at the numbers for restorative practices and how many students have been referred to restorative practices, something that hit me, I know that Dr. Spencer is a whiz with our numbers and can give us all kinds of data set, but I wonder if we have the ability to get qualitative data around the success of our restorative practices. I think that's what you're talking on. Is that what you mean when you said that we could use Panorama to evaluate the program? Will it also allow us to get qualitative data around the success of implementation and efficacy around that?
Ms. Lewis, before Dr. Soto responds, I just want to make sure, just for clarity, are you referring to qualitative data from our students when they're referred to the restorative practice centers? Or are you thinking about restorative practice in terms of how we're proactively creating community and building relationships? Or both?
I like both of those.
Okay.
Yes.
So I see the Panorama Social Emotional Learning data more as quantitative data in that there are going to be some numbers attached, and we're looking at that more from a program evaluation standpoint. I think qualitative data is something that's really vital because it's kind of like the difference between the number of oranges and how we're describing student experiences, like what is the orange actually like. And so that's something that we really need to do to open up. I know that the equity department has started really doing some work with the qualitative work where we're trying to get the input of students. I know the DPS Foundation has done some work in that direction as well. And so I would say yes and to both of those. And so I agree that that is a critical component.
And I'm thinking about recidivism. So going back to the numbers, are we tracking the decrease of recidivism of children who are being referred to as evidence of this program is working, these relationships are being restored, growth is happening?
I see Dr. Spencer, this is also an area, but as we monitor data around students who enter an RPC space, we track that in both student count, but also incident count, right? And so, so if a student goes in, that counts as one, but sometimes you might see the incident count be more than the student. So that is how we are able to determine through use of a platform such as Educator Handbook to look and see, well, how many incidents have this one student had? And so that's when we are really trying to work to think about, well, how do we use our problem-solving teams to address root causes that are going to remove barriers or challenges towards pro-social behavior.
Let me address Mr. Lee and board members Lewis regarding program evaluation as well. As you all know that we're getting to the sunset of our strategic plan. We should have presenters probably from RTI. They will come to us around March and be able to bring a case how they're going to be able to support us with this work. So we've been able to collect a lot of data, and all this data is going to dictate what's going to be the strategies moving forward 23 to 28. So there will be a lot of program evaluations with different programs, different departments as well, as we'll be starting with another strategic plan. So it's good to do program evaluations, not every year, but I think the more data we're getting, I think that's going really to help us even to fine tune our strategic plan moving beyond 2023.
Thank you for that. And keeping with the data point, and you mentioned co-located mental health today as one of the resources that we have. And I know that we had a conversation Zoom last year about co-located mental health. Also, Mr. Futrell, we had talked about in the past, there's a metric where there may be high referrals to co-located mental health, but low participation in the program. And families have to commit to it and sign up for the services. Is there a plan in place to close that gap, knowing the dire need that our students have for mental health support? It may be recognized, but the family may not follow up with it. What are some of our strategies there?
I'm really glad you asked. So first of all, I wanted to share, and this is just in the last couple of days, our pre-COVID referrals. We are on pace to move past that by a significant amount this year based on December's numbers. I believe we have around 700, and I'm probably going to get the number wrong. What is it? 781 active referrals currently. And that is a 5% increase over pre-COVID, the pre-COVID academic year. And I also wanted to share that declines are significantly down from pre-COVID numbers and from during that time period. Our strategy generally is to make sure that our clinicians are connected with the school social workers. We work with Dr. Royster very, very closely to ensure that the school social worker, who is this point person, is making sure that those referrals are being made. And as of right now, I'm happy to say that those declines are significantly less than they have been historically.
Thank you so much. And that's so good to hear that declines is happening, the gap is closing, and that we do have the supports in the school, even if families choose not to use co-located mental health. One thing that was concerning, I'm really focused on this next steps and very interested in that piece. And one of the things in the next step says that the SEL survey data analysis, and when we saw that there's a less sense of belonging for our middle school and high school students, my first thought was, oh, that's middle school and high school. But then to see it compared to the nation and that we're lower than that is really concerning. So I do look forward to hearing, we have the data, we're getting the information. How are we gonna lean in with community resources, supports, supporting our educators to increase that sense of belonging, because that's very important for kids to feel connected and to grow academically. So I look forward to hearing follow-up reports on how we're going to close that gap. Thank you so much.
That's right, Iris.
I want to thank you all for this work. I want to thank you for not just the investment in tools and partnerships and all that, which are all very much vital and critical to this work, but also in changing culture. I think that we are definitely, this pandemic has highlighted the importance of SEL, just as a general component of well-being, and addressing also stigma around mental health. I think we can all talk about the importance of community. We can all talk about the importance of creating spaces that are safe for our students, that feel that they're reflective, where their voices and their dignity can be upheld. And so I think that is the true work. We can have all the investment, and we should continue to invest as much as possible in programs that work, that have efficacy, and we are definitely doing that, and that is great to do. But I think there's also a message to just everybody who's out there, everybody who's a part of DPS, and people who will always be a part of DPS, even if you're an alumni of DPS, and that is that we have to, as much as possible, reduce harm. And I think that is the goal of any institution that wants to serve the future leaders of tomorrow. It takes a lot of work to repair harm once it's happened. It takes a lot of work to repair trust once that has been broken. And it takes a lot of work to reform, and our criminal justice system shows it, how much money goes into the criminal justice system. And when we have an opportunity, we have a very unique opportunity with our children, from the time that they are, very, very, very small. We're doing early childhood education all the way till they graduate and are essentially adults. We're close to being adults. And so I'm very grateful for all this. And with all these comments, I'm just also grateful for the heart that each of you puts into this, the intentionality with it. My question around this is that we have essentially brought in and done our own systems in terms of restorative practice centers. We have New Horizon, which is serving our students. So they're not going to rebound. They're not having to go anywhere else. We're doing these things here. But how can we continue to maintain those partnerships? How can we continue to stay abreast of community resources? And I think that is kind of vital to the work, even if our students don't have to go anywhere else. They can continue to be in our school buildings. That we continue to leverage those opportunities to bring in professionals into our school systems. As we have volunteers, I know that during the pandemic, that was seriously affected, for a short period, but we voted in November, opened up, the importance of volunteers. And so I just wanted to put out this question about ways that we continue to leverage community resources, and also the work that is happening in community. I can tell you that we have a lot of manuals that even the youth have derived, like the city of Durham has the youth listening project, and they have come up with some recommendations. They were asking for more opportunities for Durham Parks and Rec. There's a lot of guidelines in those manuals, and there's also protecting our dignity work that is happening right now, a coalition of many, many different organizations. And so if any of you, and I'm not going to list everybody, there's a whole lot of things in community and that I can shout out in terms of work around this, but what are some of the ways that we can leverage our community resources in restorative practices and all that, in ways that during this COVID pandemic, we can leverage that talent?
We're always, and Dr. Maddox Perry may have more to add, but Durham is a rich community, and we have many partners in the Durham community, and we are, always open to making sure that we're leveraging our partners. And we have used several partners to help us with all of the components of the work that was shared today. And we're currently even seeking partners for our SEL secondary curricula that we will have the opportunity to implement with the board support. So please continue to make sure that we are aware and share those with us, because we do value the partnership and expertise that our community brings, and that helps us provide and create the conditions that we need for our young people in our classrooms.
And thank you for that question, Ms. Valladares. We do have a number of partnerships and community events going on, different departments in collaboration with local organizations in the efforts of trying to bring more awareness to how we support our young people, particularly our students from historically marginalized communities. And like Dr. Hardy said, I'd just like to echo that as other things are on the horizon, or as you all see, different opportunities to engage with organizations, please share those with us, because we're looking for ways to strengthen our connections with different community organizations. So we have a lot of things. I will shout out also our curriculum and instruction department right now, because through DPS Celebrates for the next couple of months, there are a number of events that are going on in collaboration with local organizations to celebrate different facets of Black History Month, Women's History Month. There's a whole series of things that'll be going on to really highlight and just contribute to a healthy culture and climate for our schools.
And I have a follow-up. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Bullock, and for all the work that you all do. We did notice in the data that sense of belonging is something that, as kids are entering middle school, it's dropping. 43% was the number. And so that is definitely a very critical stage in development, and in every other facet of growth and everything, there are a lot of struggles with that. And going back to co-located mental health, we know our demographics don't always qualify based on insurance, based on access to the co-located mental health services. And that offers opportunity for a fund, whether it's, sometimes these organizations and institutions, they might have charity funds that they can use for the purposes of students who don't have insurance or don't qualify for Medicaid or any of the subsidized healthcare. And so, or don't have private healthcare as well. So in terms of how we are keeping that in view, I just want us to be very mindful that a lot of our students, we know what the demographics look like, and within that demographic, there are so many different layers of vulnerability, especially when it comes to access to these resources. So as we look at co-located mental health, let's also include, in addition to co-located mental health and the partners that we currently have, ways that we are either motivating these institutions to provide a fund or give charity or provide hours, or even community partners who might want to donate. And this is where DPS Foundation, their ability to fundraise and have, just funds, discretionary funds that could be used towards this purpose. We have a lot of support in our community. I'm very grateful for that. But just wanted to keep that in mind in terms of access to the resources. Thank you.
I've just got a quick comment, and then I'm going to go to Ms. Umstead. I would just like, as a follow-up item, I'd like a little more data on the Panorama survey. Specifically, they may have a white paper. I couldn't find it on their website, but how many schools are taking this? What are the demographics that we're comparing ourselves to? We're a district of 82% kids of color. So what does it mean to be in 62% of this or that? So if I could get some more data on that, it could just be a paragraph or two. I'd appreciate that. Ms. Umstead.
I had a question. It can be a follow-up item. If we can get that, we normally get the short-term suspension data disaggregated. And so we could have the data that we got today, some disaggregated data for us, that would be great. And I think, did Mr. Raven have a comment as well?
Mr. Raven and then Ms. Beyer.
First, I wanted to thank you all. Sorry that you're to my back. So, but it's heavy. Like that's the only thing that I could say about this presentation. Most of the time after board meeting, I have to go back home. I have to watch it on YouTube so I could kind of dissect it, because it's different when you're in it. It's difficult to appreciate all the information that you're sharing with us. So I wanted to say thank you for that. The one thing, and Ms. Valladares kind of already touched on this, but I think that we really do need to highlight this. On page 151, it said overall, the score was 80% when we did a survey, and it said, my school is a good place to attend and learn. So that lets us know that our students here appreciate everything that comes with attending school. The issue that I have is, and this isn't an issue with us, it's an issue with what I believe and what I perceive is something that we're just living through in these days and times. And I'm going to use a word that I learned from my fourth grader who's in class now when they're doing their story times and they're learning about inference, right? So when we're looking at the sense of belonging from grade school, we're in the top 5th percentile, right? The top 20%. It notes that we're at 90%, and that's nationwide. But then once we get to middle school and high school, somehow we have dropped to the bottom 5th percentile nationwide, which it's like a 70% swing. So that lets me know that if our kids appreciate being in school, but there is such a huge swing in their sense of belonging, that's an alarm. That's like a little alarm should be going off right now, letting everybody know that there's some support that's needed. There's a lot of things that are not being addressed. I don't necessarily believe that our students know how to communicate that, because a lot of times us as adults don't know how to communicate that. And we see that during social media. That's how us as adults, that's how we kind of see it happen in reality. But that's an issue. And part of this question I'm going to save for later, because I know we're going to be talking about the ESSER funds. But originally I was going to ask, how are we getting closer to that 1 to 250 with the counselors? I was thinking to myself, is it because our population went down? But you all did answer that we're being able to use ESSER funds. So I would just like to have an idea of how many positions that we have allocated to ESSER funds, because it sounds like that's something that we're going to need to figure out how to maintain and sustain. So thank you all for that.
We just clarify what counselor positions the ESSER funds are being used for? Because it's not, is it school-based counselors? Okay. Can you clarify that a little bit?
So specifically to what we discussed today, it is the mental health clinicians that we added, 10 positions. So those are the ESSER positions that are here, but they are part of that student support services team at the school, which includes our school-based counselors, our social workers, our nursing staff, as well as the success coaches, which that is also an ESSER position. And we have 6 success coaches. Thank you so much. I appreciate the team right there.
Ms. Spire.
Thank you all. I was going to follow up, and Ms. Umstead hit on some of this as a follow-up item, but I think we've always really been striving to be transparent with our community. And so as you disaggregate this data by subgroups, if you can also disaggregate it by schools, I think that will really help. We've been clear with folks in the past that we're not trying to hide anything. And especially, I know the Community Safety Wellness Task Forces will be looking to this data as we come out of pandemic and back into more regular school setting. It won't surprise Ms. Giovanni that this always makes me think that we need to keep working to update our dress code and some of our gender inclusive policies to make sure that we have all those protections codified in policy. And I look forward to those coming hopefully this spring. And then I've been noticing as a board member that I've seen less in-person discipline appeals. And clearly some of that's been, I think, pandemic. But it makes me wonder if we need to reiterate and share again, district-wide communication that folks do have the right of appeal and be really proactive about sharing that information, but also a lot of this that's covered today. So if your child is experiencing a need for support, who should you contact at this school? Let's let our parents and our families and our community members know more explicitly, directly, as much as we can. Let's push out that we have all these services so that we can meet unmet needs that families might be seeing at home. But I really, really appreciate all this work that the team has done. It's so, so important. Thank you.
I just want to comment on the disaggregation of data. And it is actually on our Durham Public Schools website already for the 2021, but you'll remember that the numbers are really small. So in some cases it's masked if it's smaller numbers and such. So, but it is there both by school as well as by race and gender.
Thank you, administration. This was brought for information. We did leave the administration with several follow-up items. Would appreciate that work as well. Thank you, administrative team, for being here tonight and for answering all of our many questions. With the consent of the board, we will move on to item 8A, operational services, federal ESSER funds allocation update. Thanks again, administration.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Mabenga, staff, and all those out watching this presentation tonight. I'm going to just give you some numbers based on, you gave me enough time because you had enough questions going on. I was able to pull up some numbers and I'll be able to give you some that will get to you as well. So you have them in writing, not just me talking. We put out 100 ESSER school positions, of which 15 of them were 11 were mental health counselors and 4 were professional school counselors. Of those, now let me flip to my next chart. Try to answer your questions. 10 of those are currently filled, mental health counselors. $850,000 as an average of what you're using of your ESSER funds. Your other question was, well, how many positions do we have bringing us close to the 250? Well, we have 112 school counselors, which brings us to 1 to 279 or 1 to 280, closer to 1 to 280. You have the 10 ESSER positions, which brings you to closer to 1 to 256. It takes 14 in total from the 112 to actually sustain below 1 to 250, bringing down to 1 to 248. That's with the current ADM of 31,352 students. To get those 14 additional positions put into the budget, it'd be about $1.2 million at this day in cost. Because tomorrow is going to be a higher price as it goes. With all that said, you're close, but we're not there if we want to get to the 1 to 250. But again, I keep saying, and I will always bring you back to this, that this is a state responsibility, not a local responsibility. And we do not get enough enough positions to have a 1 to 250 ratio. So from that standpoint, I'll always bring you back to that because we're going to be transparent. So anything you go to the county that's instructional support, that's the state's responsibility. But the county has provided us the resources over the years to do things above and beyond. So with that said, you got about invested in those 112 positions about $5,700, up being $5,750,000. So, I mean, another $1.2 million would be needed to get to those additional 14. Right now, like I said, you have 15 ESSER positions that are out there for those types of positions. And those will be with us for another year after this. So from that standpoint, you're close to your 1 to 2 at 1 to 256 at this point. You're in a good place, but the services needed are much more in need than ever before. That's the only problem. So you need to be about 1 to 125, let's say, to really provide the services that you need to provide all the children in this pandemic time as we come out of it. So I just wanted to give you those numbers so we could. And like I said, we will get you some more numbers on paper. So you'll have those in front of you as we begin talks in the next few weeks with the county.
What a point of personal privilege, best finance staff team of like all districts to be able to do that on the fly. Thank you, Mr. Lucifer, for answering questions quickly. That's fantastic.
I hate to have questions unanswered. That means I got to work tomorrow on them. Okay, so now what am I up here for? Up here to talk a little bit about ESSER tonight. Tonight, I probably have the shortest presentation ever. We really only have one slide to talk through tonight. And that's about something that's near and dear to everybody's heart. Additional staff retention bonuses. If you remember, you made us in November, you wanted us to make sure everybody got $1,000 in their bank account. And to do that, it was $1,538.50. We want to bring you tonight an additional proposal to do two more bonuses, retention bonuses, one in March and one in October, for those that will be coming back. With that all said, these will be $1,500 bonuses. We will not make sure they get 1,000 in their bank account. They might get 1,250. Some might get 1,300. Some might get 1,100. But we think that that will be, after analysis, after that quick last time around of wanting to make sure everyone got $1,000 before Thanksgiving, we have done some analysis to figure out that it would be best if we just gave them $1,500, let the taxes flow, and they would get more than likely above that $1,000 threshold. So, because we were with the 1538, we were doing a 22% flat tax rate. A lot of those people are under that for the most part. We found one or two that might be right there at the borderline, just depending. But we're going to make sure that everybody gets their fair share. We think the 1,500 is the way to go. That would bring it up to $4,538.50 for all staff, right? Permanent part-time, substitutes that are working 20 or more hours, just like we did in the fall, to make sure that we retain those good substitutes that we have in place, bus drivers as well. Theirs would be a prorated share of that 1,500, be $750 if they were only working half-time, that type of thing. But we're making sure that we hit all those people. Again, this go around to make sure that we're all in place. To do that, it's going to be $15 million, right? So we're going to have to shuffle the ESSER funds around, and that's why we're here tonight. Cabinet has had some discussions on how we can make this happen. We feel that we can pull at this time 10 million from operations. That means we might not be able to do as many outdoor learning areas as we would like, or we'd have to back off in some of the HVAC projects that we may have. Also, if you think about it, whenever you're planning, you think you're going to spend all that money, but you might not. So we don't want to leave it till the end. We'll work with the county to try to get more money in the meantime to do the bonds to continue to move us forward and get all our projects done. But the $65 million now go down to $55 million for operations. We would also be recouping some of the summer learning dollars that we didn't spend in the first year, not expecting to spend as many in the second year, and make some other minor adjustments to cover those items to give us the total $15 million. With that said, I just want to remind you again, last September, you all approved a $350 bonus as well for the classified staff out of local funds. Want to bring that to the forefront again. There were additional funds. You keep adding little bits and pieces, and it adds up to quite a bit. Also, the county, you went to the county last year and they got a $250 increase for all teachers for their supplements. We went from $5,425 as the starting beginning teacher to $5,675. This year, in your request, you're asking for another $4 million to bring them up to $6,500 starting. So you're talking about almost a $825 increase in their supplements for next year for certified personnel. So you all have gone and done a fabulous job of providing additional resources in addition to what the state came through with in their next. in their final bills that they passed. My staff in the payroll area, very excited that they get 1 month off, basically, from having to throw in money on top of money into the extra runs that we have to do to make this all happen. So I have to give a shout out to my staff for all that they did during these times to make sure that we were in a good place moving forward and making all this happen in a timely manner. I also do want to bring another thing to you that's not ESSER. Yesterday, we got notified that we got our Gfoa Award of Excellence, which means we got both the ASBO and the Gfoa Board of Excellence. Again, I wanted to bring that to your attention because, again, that's the finance staff and the schools and everybody working together to make our financial system work and be presentable to the public. So, as you mentioned many times, we are very transparent in Durham. We have a lot of good discussions, make it all the better for us to be able to translate into a good financial program in Durham Public Schools. So, so tonight we want to bring this to you to approve this ESSER plan for the purpose of providing a bonus in March before teachers and schools go on their spring break, and again in October as a retention bonus to say thank you for coming back and serving our students once again. I'll take questions if you have any.
Thank you, administration, for being responsive to our requests, for working to keep us competitive with our neighboring districts. Board members, this is for action. We'll start with any questions or discussion or motions.
I would put a motion on the floor just to get us started, if you don't mind. I move approval of the reallocation of federal ESSER funds for bonuses to staff.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Byer, seconded by Ms. Umstead, that we approve the administration's recommendation. Is there further discussion? Ms. Umstead.
I want to say thank you to the administration for this work and presentation. We know that there's petition going on right now where our educators are asking for a bonus, and I think that this helps get them closer to that area. So I appreciate the response in that. And I want our educators to hear that we as a board really value your work and what you're doing every single day. And when I use the word educators, I think about everyone who's working for our Durham Public Schools. We want to help show that through some of these bonuses and retention things that we're putting in place, but also through some of the other things where we are doing salary studies and trying to work to increase teacher supplements to not only think about today, but the future of what's going to happen with our salaries in school. So I just want to say thank you all for this work. I hope people hear from this board that we're supportive of our educators and want to show you that we appreciate all the work that you do.
I want to thank our staff as well. Thank our finance staff for winning awards again and again and again, and the extra work this puts on them to get it just right and get it on time to folks. I know this was well in the works before any petitions, but it shows that in Durham, we work in partnership with our educators and our teams and all of our support staff, and we value you. We're also going to the county to ask for more money. And we're trying to get our folks up to 17 an hour as a starting place in Durham at a minimum. And we're trying desperately to get our teacher supplement up. This isn't going to work long term. This extra funds is just limited time. But we really, really need our help from our community statewide is pushing on the state, pushing on our General Assembly to actually meet Leandro, or good grief, exceed it. I mean, it's a very baseline kind of thing. So we've been fighting this fight for a generation. We will keep fighting, and we're going to look for strong local support because we have commissioners that will work with us, and we're going to talk with them about it, I hope, next week when we meet with them. But thank you all, staff.
Any further discussion? Board members, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you, administration. And thank you to our staff. Item 8B, COVID-19 update, vaccination mandate and testing.
Good evening, Dr. Mubinga, members of the board. I'm going to bring you some quick updates on our vaccination status. We are still, if we could go to the next slide. We are still diligently working and pressing the mark to ensure that as many of our employees are vaccinated as we could possibly get. You can see here where our current status is, and our celebration point is we moved from 74.91 last month to 76.14% of our employees being vaccinated this month. I would like to say, and digging a little deeper into these numbers, while the transportation employees remain steady amid changes in employment, they actually have exactly the same percentage as they did last month. Our vaccination rate for our classified and personnel improved by almost 2 percentage points, and for licensed personnel by almost another percentage point. So we will celebrate that. I also want to highlight for you that this includes 128 newly onboarded employees that are still within that window to complete their information. If we can go on to the next slide. So I wanted to provide you the breakdown again. I understand that this is small, but hopefully people can make their screens a little larger to be able to see clearly. But this is the vaccination status for our elementary schools. And so what you can see here is for each of the individual sites. But what I wanted to highlight for you this month is just to show the individual efforts. I have several elementary schools that I would like to call by name that increased their percentages by 5 percentage points or more. Bethesda jumped from 91% to 96%. Fayetteville Street jumped from 71 to 83%. Holt jumped from 72 to 79%, Mangum from 81 to 86, Moorhead from 71 to 79, and WG Pearson from 67% to 83%. So while we celebrate all our schools, those are just ones that are really pushing and working to, whether it be collect information from staff, pushing staff to get vaccinated, those sorts of things. And so that is worthy of celebration. I would also highlight here that while you can see the overall percentage at the bottom of the screen for elementary schools, 24 out of our 29 elementary schools have 75% or more of their staff fully vaccinated. So our mark, we're pressing 75, then we're going to 80, then we're moving, and all of that. So 24 of the 29 are already at that mark. We can go to the next slide. Here you can see our middle schools, secondary schools, and some of our special schools. From this screen, I have to highlight the School for Creative Studies in our secondary school camp. They increased their percentage of fully vaccinated from 72 to 85%. So I really think, and I also want to specifically recognize Mr. Ferguson out at the School for Creative Studies, because in the absence of the principal, he has really been working hard with the staff to push those numbers. And so I just want to take this as an opportunity to give him a special shout out. 8 out of 9 middle schools have 75% or more of their staff fully vaccinated, okay, which is 89% of the middle schools. And 100, if you look at those numbers of the percent of the secondary schools, have 75% or more of their staff members fully vaccinated. We can go on to the next slide for our high schools. I have to give a shout out here to Dr. Wright at Hillside New Tech. They jumped, there are one high school that jumped more than 5%, from 62% to 72%. So we're approaching that 75% mark for that school. 9 out of the 12 high schools have 75% or more of their staff fully vaccinated. That's 75% of our high schools. The next slide. This is the breakdown of our department. And with our departments, the areas that have increased by more than 5 percentage points are the elementary school area, which jumped from 74 to 83%. Hearing impaired teachers jumped from 88% to 100%. Public affairs went from 67% to 100%. Student support services jumped from 59 to 64, and it's even greater than that because I'm still getting records from them even while sitting here today. Transportation services, this is like the office staff, jumped from 58 to 68%, and our warehouse team jumped from 67% to 100. So I want to acknowledge that while we still have a long way to go among, many of them fall in the category of transportation or our classified staff, that just shows that areas that are really working, and we're going to continue to work on those others. However, 23 out of our 38 departments have 75% or more of their staff fully vaccinated. So that is 61%, and we are working with those individual departments. I also just want to point out on this slide, you will notice if you look at operational services and OTs, OT, those numbers should be switched. There are 27 OTs and 3 in that operational services. So I just want to point out that correction on the slide. For Durham County as a whole, we are celebrating our 76% fully vaccinated. For Durham County as a whole, we're sitting at 72% of our community that's fully vaccinated. And so we are still working towards improving our numbers. And you can see when you break down the data this way where our work still needs to be done. And so we are continuing to work with individual supervisors at sites to make individual visits or to see how we can best work with employees to continue to improve the numbers. If you'll go to the next slide, please.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes,
Back at that slide.
I'm sorry.
Back at the slide, the driver's ed. Are those the actual people who are in the cars with the kids?
Those are the people who are in the cars with the kids. And that is specifically one area that we believe we have more people vaccinated, and Mr. Hackney is working on collecting information from me.
So we need to get that
as soon as
because
possible. Yes.
If people are unvaccinated in close proximity with kids, I have a problem with that.
Absolutely.
And so we're going to need to address that. You know, some departments, okay, even in classrooms, you have some distance, but when you're in the car right here, speaking to the student, you're like right there. And so
Definitely.
I'm going to need us to get some answers there. And if people remain unvaccinated, we're going to need, I would suggest that we try to make some decisions, because that is putting the students in harm's way, in my opinion. And so I would love to get an update on this as soon as we can.
I would like to just speak that in the conversation with Mr. Hackney wholly believes that number is greater than that 50%.
I needed to be 100.
But I need to see it, and I don't give it credit until I see it. So we are definitely working on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Lee. I had the same thoughts almost about community ed, and they're working with young children mostly, and that 45% is just alarming. But for sure in those driver's ed cars. Yeah.
Next slide, please. Some other things to consider here is we have a constantly evolving staff going on leave of absence. The data that I'm showing you with this percentages takes those individuals that are not in our buildings. They are not calculated in those numbers, whether vaccinated or unvaccinated, because they're not in our buildings. They're pulled out of the equation. The number of employees required to test weekly has dropped again to 1,255. And that includes the newly hired folks who have not provided us information yet. We continue to work on our processes. 11 out of 17 pending new hires that are slated to come in the next few days, they've already submitted their vaccination records to us. So I just think that that's a point that that process is indeed working. 92% of separated employees were removed. And out of those individuals that separated from us since the report last month, 56.52% of them were vaccinated. So I give that information just to, when I say you're looking at a balance of vaccinated and unvaccinated leaving, and we're tracking the rates of those coming in also. We have 1137 registered for weekly testing, and so we are working on communicating with that gap between that 1137 and that 1255, and again, issuing information to those folks that are not registered about expectations and making sure that they follow through on those. As the last part of my update, I also want to highlight just one piece of our efforts. And I would like to take a moment to publicly thank Old North State Medical Society for their partnership with DPS for our employee-focused information, vaccination, and testing clinic, which was held yesterday at the Mini Fort Brown Staff Development Center. Additionally, I would like to thank Nurse Howard and her volunteers, Delois Prince and the COVID team, as well as my HR staff and Dr. Danner's team at the Staff Development Center. One of the things that I would like to share from the event yesterday, while we did not have the numbers that we would hope based on the information that you have here, we celebrate each employee who showed up to help ensure that our environment stays safe. The unexpected element of yesterday is that employees showed up largely to get their children, already vaccinated employees showed up to get their children and their spouses vaccinated. And so by us extending that opportunity, that helps ensure that our households that are serving our community are safe. And so we will continue to look for more ways to provide convenient support to our employees getting fully vaccinated on site, whether it's during the day or opportunities such as what we had last night. And so with that, I am glad to entertain any questions about our current state with COVID-19 vaccination mandate.
Thank you, administration. This is presented for information. Board, any questions or discussion? Ms. Byer, then Ms. Umstead.
So I thank you for the update. I thank you that the numbers are moving in the right direction, but we still have, as you know, work to do. Have you all been able to do any work, any research to know about incentives or ways that we can further steer on our employees towards vaccination? I know that the city and county have some teeth that we don't with their benefits, but have you all thought as a team of what we can add besides, as an incentive? Extra vacation day. I don't know. What have you all talked about that? Because we had talked about it in our meeting several times ago of y'all brainstorming that for us.
So we did talk about that. Currently, the allotment of vacation days, it comes from the state. So when you talk about adding additional vacation days, then that would definitely be on the local dollar. And I think that the projection, you have a balance of, you have the majority of your staff who's already vaccinated. And then if we put this incentive in now and the cost, the relevant cost of that in comparison to efforts such as what we just discussed with just giving flat out additional bonuses and different things like that would have to be negotiated. I think you must also consider, which was part of what we discussed before, when you have a process that requires a federal consideration of a medical or religious exemption, and you exclude those individuals from being able to receive that, I just think that that is something that should really be considered and discussed what could potentially happen when looking at situations like that.
Yeah, definitely follow all state laws, definitely follow laws for allowing religious and medical exemptions. I think there's a lot of, I think there's still things that we can do creatively, and I just was hoping that you all had some of that to bring to the discussion with us. I also think there's a lot of misinformation about immunity, not vaccine acquired immunity, COVID acquired immunity. And if folks have had COVID, what the recommendation is for vaccination after COVID. So I think there's information that we can continue to share. And I'm so glad that you all did the event with Old North State, and I look forward to more things like that. I just am looking for what we can do as an employer. And you know, comp time, I mean, you know, I'm pulling things out of the air, but I thought we had tools in the tool bag that we could go to. And I don't know.
So I would just add quickly, particularly Nurse Howard and I have spoken with tons of employees. And I can't say this for everyone that is left, that is unvaccinated, but I would say for a large majority of them, financial incentives is probably not going to be what changes their mind. I think we can still look and consider those things. I'm just saying that I'm not if we think that that's going to move us to 85% like that with the offering of those incentives based on the conversations that we've had with employees, I'm not sure that that will. I would also highlight that part of what was tremendously beneficial with Old North State is the whole beginning part of that was having direct access to medical professionals that could answer any question. They were right there intersecting with our employees to answer any questions, to discuss information that they were sharing, and all of that. And so I think that having those opportunities really go a long way, and sharing personal testimonies about experiences also seems to resonate a lot with our staff.
Oh, I think that's really powerful. And I think that's important. I mean, I always encourage folks to talk to their own physician, and knowing that because of systemic issues, a lot of folks don't have a family physician and don't have a provider. So I wonder if there are ways that we could partner with the city and county and have a staffed question line for folks, or that where they could free video chat with folks. I mean, whether, you know, something where they could get solid information. But I appreciate y'all continuing to push on innovative ways to solve this.
Thank you. Ms. Umstead.
Thank you for the presentation and for the continued efforts. It's exciting to hear about new folks getting vaccinated every day. I did have a couple questions. For people who are exempt, have a medical exemption, where are they falling in our data
They fall
set?
in as a no.
Is a no. Is it, I don't know if this, can we pull those folks out for our next time we have this presentation, just so we have a sense of who is a yes, who's a no, and then who actually is approved to not be vaccinated?
I can do that. I can pull them out, or I can show them in a specific category as an exemption.
Yes, let's,
I can do that.
a yes, a no exempt category. I just think it'd be
Absolutely.
helpful to know, and it could even be in the complete, in the total numbers, but I just think it'd be helpful to know how many of those no folks are exempt. I think the other question I would have, and that board, this is also your pleasure. I wonder if we could do this every other month. I'm thinking about if you are getting vaccinated, it's a 6-week time period before you're fully vaccinated. And so that would, every other month would give us a little more time to see if any numbers move. And so happy to have that discussion with you all. My other point would be, I think following up on Ms. Beyer, you know, there's an incentive, but then there's also the way that you make it inconvenient for folks who maybe aren't vaccinated. And I wonder if we have any tools for that. I know some people have to pay more for their health insurance. I know that's through the state for us. Do we need to have people pay for testing? Like, I just wonder what are some of those tools? We don't have to talk about it now, but just something for us to consider. All right, I'm on a roll here, and this is my last point. It's about actually student vaccination. We haven't had a lot of conversation about how many of our students are vaccinated. We know national trends don't look great right now for 5 to 11, and I would like for us to have a conversation about how many of our students are vaccinated in Durham Public Schools. How are we making sure that families have access to the attestation form so they can report those vaccination rates? Because I also know that'll be helpful for all of the contact tracing and exposure, different things that you have to do. So that's the end of my
I
comment.
think our efforts towards student vaccination are great. And I just highlight again, that was the unexpected surprise from yesterday. Out of the collection of the data, the majority of the individuals vaccinated yesterday were students. So I think that was definitely a good unanticipated side of yesterday.
Just a quick reaction to Chair Umstead regarding this COVID data to be presented every 2 months, which I will strongly advocate. It's really time consuming as we gearing up to the recruitment season. I can see really our assistant superintendent for HR really being swamped, not be able really to focus on recruitment. So I think that should be really helpful. If we find another way to be able to update our board, our community via other means, I think that would be helpful. I should be really swamped with this. Thank you.
Ms. Valladares?
We have an employee portal, and I just had a question about utilizing our employee portal banners, communication, just reminders, click here, like being able to interface, like to continue to drive that every time they go in there to look at, their timesheets or look at their salary or look at anything related to bonuses or anything like that. That there is visible ways that we're leveraging our employee portals for any, the expectation that we have as a district to keep each other safe. Part of that is, doing the best that we can. We're doing it with masks, we're doing it with vaccines. And so I just think that there's ways, and I'm wondering, are there any limitations to the employee portal and utilizing that as a place to kind of.
So we have worked very closely with public affairs in a lot of our branding and in different things around vaccination. I would have to check into specifically the employee portal and how that would pull in. So I can do some research for that. We have many of those efforts, but we can see how we can step those up and maybe have a message and different things like that pops up every time someone goes in.
And if I may add, I mean, sometimes it's something like, this is pending, and it just, for some people just seeing that like this is pending, you have something pending, and then they click on it and they're like, of course, upload your vaccination.
We don't have our employee portal, which is out of date and in the process of being revamped. But that and the DPS staff links on our website, they're all very passive. The places such as the payroll portal that our employees use, that they activate more often. They don't give us a lot of flexibility for us to do something on the way in. By the way, have you remembered to get vaccinated yet? Where we're having more success, and as Dr. Lassane said, after a certain point, you'd start defining success in terms of inches rather than miles, is in direct outreach with telephone calls and emails. We had good response to the Old North State by using text messaging with our employees, albeit primarily for the family members that they brought in that night. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't use them, but we're having better results with relationship building and what I'd call retail marketing rather than wholesale marketing. At this point, the resistance to vaccinations at this point is deep-seated and born of fear and mistrust, and that takes a lot of work to overcome. In the meantime, we wear our masks, we distance, and we require testing.
Administration, thank you for this. I would like to double down on one point made earlier about the sending home of the attestation form. My own experience is that was not an automatic in the phone calls around contact tracing. I'm pretty confident we haven't just sent it to everyone. It probably needs a header page with it or a phone call to go with it to explain the benefits, but
Are you talking about for students? Just
I'm
for
talking about
clarity?
for students.
Oh, okay.
Correct.
I just,
Correct. Yeah, the student attestation form. that it prevents a 5-day stay at home if it's on file and you're a close contact. So this was it for information. We appreciate it. Ms. Beyer?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And, you know, like Ms. Umstead said, I think we are learning from our student athletes because we have been requiring proof of vaccination or testing for students participating in athletics. So I wonder if there is a presentation that we could have in the near future on kind of what we've done, what we've learned, and what our vaccination rates are, and amongst some of those students as we work towards gathering more information and encouraging student vaccination throughout the community. Because I think that is a subgroup that we've had some success with, and we might as well see what we've learned locally and how we can expand and build on that. Thank you all.
Thank you, administration. All right, Operation Services, item 8C, Durham Safe Routes to School Program.
Thank you and good evening, board and Dr. Mabanga. We're going to be joined today by Mr. Palmer and Ms. Kristen Brookshire to discuss the overview of the Durham Safe Routes to School program at DPS. I also have some representatives from North Carolina Department of Transportation.
Good evening, all, and thank you, Dr. Monk. Board, it's a pleasure to be here this evening. We thought we would share some positive news and uplifting news as we are, to set the tone for our community and our board. As a reminder, historically, 60% of our students have been riding the bus to school. This year, that number has dropped all the way down to 40%. That delta, that 20%, means that we have more car riders than ever. Yes, in some instances, we have more pedestrians and bicyclists coming to school as well. If you could, let's go ahead and open the presentation. Thank you. On the next slide. So wanted to talk a little bit about our supports for community transportation in Durham, our history of safe routes here in Durham as well, a presentation from Bike Durham, who's here tonight, recipients of the NCDOT award in conjunction with the city of Durham, and any questions or considerations you may have. Next slide, please. So just this week, we were fortunate to have Ms. Kristen Brookshire join Durham Public Schools. Ms. Brookshire is a 10-year veteran of Highway Safety Research Center at the UNC Chapel Hill. Kristen is not able to join us this evening, but she is a national leader in promoting equity and safety for school travel. Kristen's main task is that 60% of kids that are not on the yellow bus. We wanted to highlight that for the board and the community. Again, this is for information, just to let you know that we are focusing on all students. We realize school travel now more than ever is a stressful experience for students and families, and there are severe safety and equity concerns that we have to address across modes. Next slide, please. Over the last 15 years, Dale McKeel with the city of Durham, who is the Bike and Ped program manager, has been supporting Durham Public Schools in the acquisition of state and federal funds to promote equity and access to our schools. We can look as near as University Drive at Hope Valley Elementary. If you go by over there, you'll notice we have 300 students that live only a quarter mile away in Colonial Apartments, but they can't get to school. So we run 10 buses to go get those kids to school. With the support of Mr. McKeel, as well as the city of Durham, we're able to promote access to the school site and hopefully in the long term, not only do equity, but safety as well, ensuring that kids can get to school in a safe and equitable fashion. So it's going to take all of these strategies, in addition to the others that we've been working with you on this fall and certainly this year, to promote access to our schools. On the next slide, if you would please. We're very fortunate here in Durham to receive a grant from NCDOT through the Federal Highway Administration that is in support of walking and biking to school in Durham. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to the Executive Director of Bike Durham, Mr. John Talmadge. John?
Thank you, Matthew. Good evening, and I appreciate this opportunity to present to you. I'm John Tallmadge, Executive Director of Bike Durham, proud parent of 3 daughters, 2 of whom have already graduated from DPS, and the youngest who is a freshman at Riverside. And unfortunately, I missed curriculum night because I've been here with you, but hopefully my wife caught it. I also want to introduce part of our Safe Routes to School team, Carmen Kwan, who is a Bike Durham board member and our education committee chair and oversees our work here. And then our contractors, Stephen Mullaney and Jacopo Montobio. We also have 2 bicycle safety educators, Ruth Cathal Brown and Bess Baldwin, and are hoping to hire a few more to support that work in the coming weeks. Safe Routes to School started as a volunteer-led effort. Jen McDuffie is the person who got some small grants and brought volunteers and brought the programming to schools for a number of years, and also supported the city's application for getting the funding from NCDOT. And Bike Durham was awarded a contract with the city through their proposal process last spring. And so we've been underway about 11 months now. Next slide, please. The Safe Routes School program under this arrangement has these 2 components, both the walk and bike to school events to build culture and awareness of biking and walking to school as an alternative, and bicycle safety classes, which is designed to give 4th and 5th graders skills and practice at becoming confident on bicycles. This is part of a national program that is intended to get more youth walking and biking to school for the physical health benefits for the students, for the safety, the traffic safety issues, for the environmental benefits of fewer people driving their kids to school, and to avoid the chaos on our streets of the morning drop off and the afternoon pickup that often happens around the school day. Next slide, please. Bike Durham was excited about this opportunity when the city put out their proposal because our vision is for a Durham where everyone has access to safe, affordable, and sustainable transportation, regardless of who they are and where they live. And we use education, events, and advocacy to advance that agenda and to empower everyone to walk, bike, and ride transit more often. So this is a perfect fit for our mission. Next slide, please. In this first year of our work, we were really able to get going in the fall. We had some small events at Merrick Moore Elementary School in the spring, but because of the hybrid nature and just the difficulty of the pandemic, not much happened until this fall when students were back. October is Walk to School month, and we had 13 schools that participated at different levels. Eastway was the most involved, and we had over 5,000 students participate throughout that month in the events at the schools. We've got some photos, next slide, of the day. Some of these are at Eastway, some of these I think are Merrick Moore, and the next slide, please. So Eastway is the biggest event, and they've done this for a number of years. Principal Brooks is really excited and proud, and brings the music, and he's got a lot of the banners, and he's got the walking school bus, and happened to do it the day before Halloween, so kids were dressed up and families were there. It was a great event. Next slide, please. The other element is the bicycle safety course. So we use a curriculum for 4th and 5th grade that is adapted from a statewide curriculum called Let's Go, and are able to work with the PE teachers typically to bring that to school and take all the courses within a grade. So whether it's 4th grade or 5th grade over a period of several weeks. There's a classroom component and there's an on-bike component where they get to practice those skills. Right now, we're able to do it at one school at a time because of the staffing resources that we have. But again, we're hoping to hire some more educators that can be on site at the schools. We're also talking about a train the trainer process where we can work with the PE teachers so they can more independently offer this. Next slide, please. We bring bikes, so we've got 25 bikes that we're able to take to the school and leave there during the course period. We bring helmets. Next slide, please. I thought we had helmet. That'll be the next one. So we bring helmets, we bring bike pumps, all the materials, and are there for 3 to 4 weeks at a time. And we've been getting great reaction. This is a 5th grade student at Merrick Moore Elementary. And what was really exciting is to hear that he's taking what he learned at the school, he's teaching his own cousins, he's teaching his own family members, and encouraging his parents to join him out. And also taking some of those safety skills, right? The wearing of a helmet and making sure that your tires are pumped up, things like that. Next slide, please. This is just an image of the early morning I think this might have been Spring Valley Elementary. And next slide. And the students getting hands-on, pumping up tires. On the last day, they do a relay race that I think Stephen and Jacopo put together to make it fun and give them, again, another different way of practicing some of these skills. Next slide. We've also received really positive feedback from the PE teachers that have, where we've been at the school. This is from Coach Wilson at Merrick Moore again. And you see there at the end where she says she's excited to have this program come back next year. What we want to think about is how do we do this more than one touch per year for the students? And how do we stretch it from one time in 4th or 5th grade to maybe starting even younger and going through middle school, creating opportunities for high school students to be involved in the education or learning some other related skills that are connected with bicycling. Next slide, please. And this is from Coach Watson at Eastway Elementary. With her, we suggested, and she loved the idea of following the course, doing a Saturday event for the whole school and the neighbors around Eastway Elementary. So we did a Saturday skills course. We had about 40 students who participated, and their families, and it turned out great, and it's something that we want to emulate with each school as we go from one school to the next with the course, so that make it aware to the and bring it to the entire family, connect it to the neighborhoods, connect it to younger children so they can look forward to them. On the next slide, tangibly, what's next? In May, we have the Bike to School Day, so there'll be more bike and walk to school day events throughout that month. We're hoping to get 20 schools participating, up from the 13 that participated in the fall. We will have bicycle safety classes at least 3. We know that they'll be at Glen and Creekside and at Eno Valley, thank you. And we're hoping that to nail things down with a 4th school. There's several that are interested, but we have to work out the schedules. And then to build on our team so that we have Spanish-speaking capabilities on every team that is in the schools. To think about summer programming so that there are opportunities, whether it's with the Boys and Girls Club. We've been talking at Merrick Moore where they have some summer programming, figuring out how to do that year round. And then also as we're working with the students, Jacopo and Ruth and Bess are identifying students who don't have bikes at home and they are interested in that and looking for a way in partnership probably with the bicycle co-op to be able to make connections and give kids bicycles, helmets, safety equipment with them. And the final slide. Also thinking about future impact, right? We want to build the skills. We want to build culture around walking and biking to school so that it feels more normal for families. But then the third piece is also making sure that there's safe infrastructure. I mean, we have lots of schools where there aren't not sidewalks connecting the nearby neighborhoods. We have schools that are on the periphery where there aren't nearby neighborhoods. So it's going to have to be tailored for the different schools. But we'd like to work with the students, with the parents, with the school administrators and teachers to identify what those gaps are, what those obstacles are, and then communicate that back to the city, back to the North Carolina Department of Transportation. There are other parties that would be involved in knocking down those obstacles so that it becomes possible and a reality for families as we go forward. And then on the bicycle safety side, raising the visibility of this, being able to build our capacity so we can be in more schools, and as I mentioned, stretching it from younger ages all the way up to the high school opportunity. We've got another slide that is mostly for anyone who might be watching it or seeing this later about, next slide, please, how they can get involved and support this work or volunteer to be part of the work that we're doing. And we're here for any questions or comments that you may have.
Great, thank you so much. Ms. Valladares.
So I am really, really grateful for the work that you all have been doing and just the ways that you have been very intentional. And I know that we've had conversations, we've shouted y'all out in the past, but also one of the things that our district is moving towards, especially I have to shout out our operations department, is giving the bigger picture of how we as an institution of learning and the leadership development are finding ways to be eco-friendly, and also reduce our carbon footprint and all other kinds of things. And how in our last there was a presentation where every school, there were measures of like energy consumption. And one of the things that was very interesting was that there were some schools that, have some work to do on that end, but they were the ones that were very visible. I mean, I just, from talking to you all, like, knowing how many schools are participating in, these initiatives where kids are encouraged to walk, there's more outdoor events happening and more of that awareness, that everything that we do has an impact. And, if we reduce our carbon footprint, it's something that is for the future. It's something that definitely benefits everyone. And so I really want to commend you all as partners and also as folks who are educators. And I know Merrick Ward, you talked about like the community gardens and all the other things, all the other ways that you were all promoting this. But when it comes to the work with bikes, I'm really grateful that you are all raising that awareness. I remember how impactful it was for Eastway. I remember Jacopo was right there and Ideal was driving by and I was going to work and it was like just the sound of the kids, it was like, it just made my day. Because the sound, there was no, there's no words to tell like the excitement of kids. And we want to excite kids. We want kids to be excited for school, to love school. And there was just the sound that just was so loud and palpable of like the joy they were experiencing in that event. So just a lot of gratitude for you all. I am also grateful that you are looking for ways that kids who don't have access to bikes or that those partnerships are there and that's part of your plan as well. I know that demand is higher than sometimes can be a little challenging, but providing those opportunities for the kids. So it's so much to be grateful for and so much to shout out. Carmen, thank you. And Jacopo and Stephen, of course, thank you so much for all the work. And John, thank you for the ways that, you continue to partner with us and also in your work with the city, because I know that this is, we're all moving in the same direction, trying to increase quality of life and do great things in the city. So thank you.
Ms. Lewis?
Thank you for this presentation and just sharing with us the way you all have been partnering and which schools and the impact, the bikes that the children are getting and receiving from this work and collaborative. So thank you so much for all of your volunteer and just giving back to the schools and community with safe routes to schools, with our bike walk to school days. I also appreciate you hearing you say, we have to change the culture of the habits our kids are in to do more than just one day. And I'm curious about that because having 3 kids in the schools now, and I can, I'm guilty. My middle school child asks all the time, can I walk to school or can I ride my bike? And I think about my inconveniences to have to get him up earlier and things of that nature to make it to school on time. But it is a mind shift change. It is a culture change. I'm wondering I'm curious to know if you're aware of other cities who have made this leap from it being a day to more of a culture and what kind of things that we can do to support that.
You want to share something?
I need to go to the microphone.
It's the millions of people at home that want to hear.
Is it? Okay, I'm Stephen Way. I've been a Durham Public Schools teacher for, I think, 25 years now. I taught some of your children in this room, and all my bosses are here. But yeah, Boston is a huge example of the infrastructure and a cognitive shift on how they approach cycling culture, rather than it being cycles that get in the way of things happening, into a vehicle that actually makes greater things happen. Right? We could go on how this looks for magnet schools and things like that, right? But there's, Detroit, a city that's like burnt to the ground. I think it's once a week, they have 5,000 people that go out and ride bikes. You can look it up online. It's unbelievable. People come out, cheer for the families in the streets. It's kids, it's adults. So, the spark, the Durham Public Schools thing, that should be it. Looks like bicycle wheels to me. Right? To be able to change it. And earlier you talked about social emotional learning. This is directly connected, right? Students pumping up tires. It's not like an end of grade test, but it's a test of perseverance, problem solving, getting along with each other. So reducing some of those suspension rates, it's goes hand in hand with a lot of what we talked about today at the meeting. So if we don't know cities that are doing it yet, then Durham should be the city that other school boards are talking about.
And I would imagine we just also have to have the infrastructure, schools that have sidewalks connected to the neighborhoods that are nearby as well.
But I wanted to say thanks and dovetail with that. I mean, we're not that far removed from if you lived within a mile of school, you walked. I have, my colleagues have heard me talk about this, but this culture of fear that we're living in, where we're afraid of the catastrophe, we're afraid of an abduction or a shooting, and the numbers just don't bear that out. So I know our administration is paying attention to that, but I have personally heard administrators that say, oh, that hole in the fence that's got a path to this neighborhood, that's a safety concern, when it's actually an opportunity for kids to get to school in a different way. So I know our administrators are working with administration on that, but that needs to be centered in this conversation too. And I appreciate your advocacy. I mean, I taught at Hillside for 7 years. Cook Road still doesn't have a sidewalk, and tons of those kids go to Hillside and risk their lives every day. Cheek Road, Chapel Hill Road, as you mentioned. So thank you for this work. I may or may not have walk to school yard signs in my crawl space. And please keep it going, keep it growing.
I appreciate you shouting out Jen and all her leadership. Durham misses Jen and her heart for this, but it's great to know that Bike Durham is in great hands with y'all's leadership. Jen always used to remind us about the need for equity and about the need for bike racks as we plan and build. Dr. Monk, I know you're on that, but the infrastructure for this needs to be there at the schools. And I just get excited about the possibilities of this being part of PE in every elementary school. So why couldn't it be part of 3rd, 4th, 5th grade curriculum that we have a set of school bikes, right? And we invest in people to teach this life skill to kids. Because I think biking and swimming are 2 things that we really should be teaching children for safety and life skills going forward. maybe, I could see this being a great incentive for folks in our summer learning camps that we're going to be doing with the ESSER funding for the next couple of years. So why not use those funding as a chance to kind of grow this? You can see the enthusiasm in these children. Y'all didn't bring us video, I'm sure. If we had video, it's a great motivator, and we've got to keep working on the equity piece because 120 bikes probably is not going to be enough to meet the equity needs of children that need bikes, but also need safe places to learn to ride and get the confidence and the skills they need to ride safely. So I can see the Durham community just really wrapping their arms around donating bikes to children if we could get the work with the foundation and get folks, charged up. So thank you all so much. I'm glad you brought us something exciting at the end of the meeting.
Mr. Raven.
I wanted to say thank you for this, and I feel like I've been on an email chain with you before, so it's nice to finally meet you in person. I have a personal question on this because I feel like nowadays we're so siloed. We see how our household is, we see what our neighborhood looks like, but I'm curious as to when you all are doing this, and you've been doing it for a few years now, are you realizing so many more kids are enthusiastic about this because they're not even necessarily growing up riding bikes? Like I think a lot of us take that for granted. We grew up on bikes, and a lot of these kids now seem like they don't have that same experience. So I'm wondering what it's really like for them.
Yeah, I mean, Jacopo, you're there at the schools every day. You might want to share your experience. I came out to the Eastway event on a Saturday and, saw kids that in a range of they knew how to ride or they were really learning for the first time. And just the pride on the kids' face when they are able to go from one end of the parking lot to the other on their own is really super to see. And we want to be able to build on that and make sure that they can continue to have that experience and even, feel more and more confident. The independence that comes from being able to propel yourself around and go at whatever speed that you want is, it's an important, moment in kids' lives when they do learn to do that. So it's real rewarding. Now, though Jen was doing this as a volunteer for several years, as an organized activity with staff to be in the schools, we've really just started this past fall. So we don't have a lot of history of following kids for a while. But that's something that we should definitely be doing, is making sure that we can tell those stories about not just their immediate reactions, but 6 months, a year, 2 years later.
Thank you again, and I'll definitely be following you all on social media to see where this goes. So thank you.
Right.
Great. Thank you to our guests, and thank you, administration, for bringing us. Thanks for all the work. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Yep. All right, board, that brings us to item 9, our summary of follow-up items.
So I will start and Dr. Monk will assist if I miss any items on the priority 2 update, providing a specific counseling update regarding our ASCA model and meeting those ratios. Panorama data, information regarding Panorama, the school districts they work with, as well as the demographic information, as well as the data provided today in the presentation. Transition planning from our ESSA position, specifically in the area of student support services, cycle of evaluation with our SEL curricula, qualitative data regarding our RPC programming, as well as RPC centers. Disaggregated discipline data, Dr. Spencer did share the location of that information. Co-located mental health access and cost specific to students. Positions allocated from our ESSER funds regarding student support services. Paul did provide an update, but we'll make sure that that's also in writing. Dress code as it relates to the data from Ms. Byer, as well as communication to our families regarding our discipline code of conduct and the appeals process. With Dr. Lassane's presentation, specific updates regarding the staffing with our driver's education staff, as well as an update to the board in the future regarding what we've learned from our vaccination mandate for student athletes and extracurricular activities, and how in this most recent presentation, thinking about how we can leverage some of this for summer programming and students having the opportunity to bike to programming.
So y'all are gonna have a boring month or couple weeks. Thank you for all that extra homework. We really appreciate the information. Board members, if there's nothing further, I will accept a motion to go into closed session for the reasons stated on the agenda.
I move that we go into closed session for the reasons stated in the agenda.
If I could take a point of privilege before we second that motion. I just want to, as we're talking about sense of belonging with the children in SEL earlier, I just want to make note that on Monday, February 28th, from 6 to 7:30, the Equity Affairs Department has pulled together a Crown Act event. Last year, we did a resolution for March 1st to 7th to be our Crown Act Week. So in kicking that off at Hillside High School from 6 to 7:30, registration will open tomorrow. There will be the presence, the power, the politics of the Crown Act. And I just want to make sure that all the millions of viewers that are watching know that we have this going on to make sure that our children have a sense of belonging, acceptance, and non-discrimination. So I'm just happy to announce that. I just want to do that before we went into closed session. Thank you.
I'll second.
Great. It's been moved by Ms. Viadara, seconded by Mr. Lee, that we go into closed sessions for the reasons stated on the agenda. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are now in closed session.
We are now back in open session. Dr. Mabenga.
Madam Chair, I'm here to seek your approval for the personnel report as discussed at the closed session.
Move
That we
approval of,
approve.
go ahead.
I move we approve the personnel report as dated February 10th, 2022 in a closed session.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Lewis, seconded by Ms. Byer. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please use the same sign. It passes unanimously. And with that, we are adjourned.